And I got to say, guys, I've been thinking about this all morning, and I think I figured out where your perspectives are coming from. Brian, you're a man of the law. You're a policeman. Okay. So you know better that if you want to grab someone's legs, you're probably going to get in trouble if they don't want you to.
That's right.
Rick, on the other hand, doesn't even care about the law. He
He's
doesn't.
a rebel.
He'll grab a leg.
Thanks, Dave.
He doesn't care. So I think that's where we start. Hey guys, David Loshelder, Dadbod Judo. Hey, we're on the podcast today. I got two special guests. I'm going to have these guys duke it out. We're talking about leg grabs today. And I got to say, guys, I've been thinking about this all morning, and I think I figured out where your perspectives are coming from. Brian, now you're a man of the law. You're a policeman. Okay. So you know better that if you want to grab someone's legs, you're probably going to get in trouble if they don't want you to.
That's right.
So it kind of makes sense. So you know the law. Rick, on the other hand, doesn't even care about the law. He doesn't.
He's a rebel.
He'll grab a leg.
Thanks, Dave.
He doesn't care. So I think that's where we start. I think that's just to give my audience an idea, give the audience an idea of like where you're coming from at least. The cop versus the crook. I think we're going to start.
All right. Okay. I get it. Rick's the rebel. All right. I get it. And I'm the law and order guy. I'm the law man, I guess.
You can't grab a leg. Don't grab legs. Actually, it's not illegal anymore, so I guess it's okay.
Well, it's still illegal in the IJF. But you know what? I don't like saying that. I don't like saying that it's illegal and that they banned leg grabs because they didn't. They banned leg grabs in Tachiwaza. And I understand, like, some people are going to think, like I said in our last podcast, that some people are going to think that it's silly for me to like talk about how like leg grabs and these leg grab techniques like still live on in the Newaza position. I get people are going to think that's silly. I don't think that it is. I scoop up legs all the time in the Newaza position, and it allows me to get a lot of really good positions and finish a lot of matches with pins. So I'm not ready to completely say that these techniques and these movements like Morote Gari, aka the double leg, or Kabisu Gaeshi, the ankle pick, or Kuchiki Tayoshi, the single leg. I am not ready to say that those techniques and those movements are completely dead because the reality is that they're not. You can watch any IJF tournament, and I guarantee you'll see at least a couple of those movements, those positions, those techniques that I just mentioned. You'll see them used in a Newaza position. And let's also be honest, when you watch freestyle wrestling and you see them going for freestyle or folk style, when you see them going for those techniques, when you see an ankle pick, does it happen when they're standing upright into a clinch, or even a lot of times it happens like when they're already on the ground anyway? You know, the wrestlers are so low to the ground. When they shoot for a low single, they're pretty much diving on their stomachs anyway. So a lot of these leg grab techniques and stuff, when you look at these different disciplines that have them, a lot of times they're damn near on the ground anyway, you know. So I don't think it's that big of a deal to limit them to Newaza. In fact, I think it's better for the sport because, again, like I said before, it basically solidifies judo as its identity as being the big throw martial art. You know, we have to have an identity, and there's a reason why freestyle wrestling is not the big throw wrestling style. It's Greco. Why? Because in Greco, you also cannot grab the legs. And I think if you want any martial art, any fighting style to have that identity, you have to limit the leg grabbing, and you have to keep the sport upright.
Yeah, you know what, man? I don't really understand where you're coming from with that, to be honest. I mean, it's like
Why?
I don't know. I mean, it's like it's not about leg grabs, it's about throws. And you're attacking the leg to score. I mean, yeah, you can grab the legs when you're in Newaza. That just kind of makes sense. You can do almost anything down there, right? So I guess I'm a little bit confused on like where you're coming from with the attacking the legs. I mean, you can't do Morote Gari because it's off the grip. You have to have one hand on this on the judo gi to then attack, right? So like what I mean, I don't get it. Like, where's the difference?
Like, what do you mean? That you mean that, like, if you're, well, it's like what I said in the last. If I think I kind of understand what you're saying, it's like I said in the last video we did, where if leg grabs are on the table in any form or fashion, there's no way that the players are not going to squat low and put their hips back. There's just no way. And the IJF knew that. That's why the IJF changed the rule. And that's, the people within the wrestling community and the international wrestling community understand that. That's why Greco-Roman wrestling exists. Because Greco-Roman wants to feature the big throw. So in order for them to do that, they're not saying, well, if you have a hold of a headlock, or an underhook, then you can scoop up, the leg with one arm, and then that's still fine. No, they understand that if you really want to feature the big throw, leg grabs have to be off the table, and you have to keep it keep the sport upright, keep the posture upright, and encourage these guys to get these lifts. And the only way you're really going to be able to do that effectively and consistently is if the sport is upright, in which case the leg grabs would have to be off the table to prevent players from squatting low and putting their hips back. And that.
Rick, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so like, first of all, Brian, I actually agree with a lot of the things you're saying, which is kind of like cool. But with this one point here, I think the way that they've set up things now with the rule set, there would probably be a lot of Shidos if someone decides to push out and sit back. I think they do that now anyway in the rule set. I mean, you see like a lot, the Shidos go pretty often. So I think the rules could be put forward to encourage the engagement. If only, and I have to stress this piece of it because I agree with you as well from what they're saying, only if certain leg grabs are involved. Like the Teguruma, Kataguruma, I believe, are what's on the table for the All Japan Open tournament. I think that's what it is, where they're trialing this. I don't, because you still have to have a sleeve or a collar, right? You can only do it with one hand. So my
That's what I
thought is,
understand.
right. So, like, because that's also where I'm agreeing. I don't think the leg grab should be a free for all. That's then you start to get, to your point, then you get into wrestling scrambles.
Yeah.
But for a throwing standpoint, if the IJF says, look, you can't sit back, you can't hunch over, which was what we do in jiu-jitsu. You can't do that in judo. You have to stay engaged. You have to attack. It keeps the leg grabs with the limited leg grab options that you have in there. And if you sit back, you're just going to get Shidoed and Hansumaki, and you're done. I don't think anyone's going to go out and compete and say, I just want to go get 3 Shidos. It's a 3 now, I think, for disqualification.
3. 3 and you're out.
So that's where I think where the IJF, if they would bring this back, would put in the rule set to allow some of these throws to come back and not allow overly defensive posture and passivity. I would think that they would accommodate for that, which means it adds a dynamic where there's these other 2 things thrown in there, but it doesn't turn into a free-for-all for leg grabs. Because like you said, you get to those ankle picks and stuff like that, it's on the ground, you're down already. A lot of single leg takedowns, wrestlers will come out on an angle and they'll do like that sort of half circle, scoop up the leg and come in.
Yeah.
That's not a throw. That should not be a part of it.
Yeah,
I'm with you on it. I just think the Teguruma, if executed appropriately, and a Kataguruma could be in there with the idea that the rule set supports active engagement and combating. That's how I think that could work.
I do agree with that, and I think you have some good points, particularly about how it would be penalized if guys were stiff arming and keeping their hips back, because we penalize that already in the IJF. So that's a fair point. However, there's one other problem though, and I think this is actually the bigger problem, because I do think the IJF probably could regulate that with Shidos. But one of the reasons why I think, and I'm just speculating, that the IJF got rid of them in the first place was not, part of it was because they wanted to keep the posture more upright. But I think the even bigger problem than that was the fact that the attacks and the false attacks are really hard to penalize, because if you drop down, even if we are talking about having the rule set where you still have to have a grip of the upper body, even then, if I still sort of dive in, even if I have an upper body grip, if I dive in for like a, what might look like a teguruma, if I go to like hug the leg and then dive in and then I don't get it and I end up on my stomach, it's like you can't look at that technique or that attempt and say that it's a false technique. That's a false attack. That's a fair attack if I dive in. The problem is it's almost impossible to counter. And to be fair, that's why leg attacks are so effective. That's why in the UFC, the best takedown artists were using doubles and singles, and George St. Pierre and John Jones, go down the list. Those guys scoop up those double legs. It's because they're so effective, because they're very hard to counter. So that becomes the problem too, is where if we want to allow leg grabs, and say, okay, well, yeah, we can regulate the posture with Shidos. Okay, fine, fair enough. Maybe they can. But then the second problem is, now what do you do when a guy's up by a Wazari and now he's like, okay, cool, I'm just going to dive at the legs. They can't Shido me because that's a legit attack. I'm scooping his leg and I'm driving, but I'm ending up on my stomach. How do you counter that? See, what they had to do, they had the same problem with drop Seoinage. Guys doing drop Seoinage would do that. But because again, it's what do you do if I have your lapel and I turn and I drop? You can't really say that that's an invalid technique. So what they did is they changed the rule and said, if you're on your knees and I throw you, that's still a valid throw. You are not safe on your knees. And a big reason why they did that was because guys were doing what I just talked about by just kind of flopping to their knees, trying for a Seoinage, and then just sort of just stalling out for the rest of the match and winning by Wazari. So they allowed techniques to be done so you could counter Seoinage off the knees. Now the question now becomes, if we're going to allow leg grabs, how do you stop a guy from just diving at the legs? Because how do you counter that?
So I was going to actually ask you about the drop Seoinage, because that you still see that in matches these days where like someone will drop, and like even like I was telling this to Dave, I went to that Kosen Judo thing a couple weeks ago, which was really cool. And you even saw a lot of that where people would just like, they would telegraph their Osoto, they would telegraph their Seoinage, and they would, they would get stood back up. So like I was curious about that as well and how that was addressed, because I wasn't certain on that, because you do see those constant drops. But I think, and this is particularly in Iguruma is the one I'm thinking of. I know there's a bazillion variations. Like, I was watching some of the footage. Sometimes people in the past, when it was legal, they would almost do like, I think, and I could be wrong, maybe it's a different throw. They would go in, and instead of like the lifting and the dumping motion you see with the classical, they were almost driving in, like you said, Brian, on their belly. At that point, I think the way that they could adjust for that is enforce the way that the throw is being executed. Do you know what I mean? I know that gets really complicated, but like instead of like diving in, you still have to go and lift. And then if you see people dropping and diving in on that, then you're in that sort of half attack, not a real attack, feint attack, whatever. I would think they could look at it that way. If I'm seeing Teguruma executed the way I've seen it, through these videos,
It's possible, but I think the problem that you run into there, though, it's like, because Neil Adams brings this up. If you watch IJF tournaments, Neil Adams is, he has brought this up multiple times, where he said, well, maybe we could bring leg grabs back as long as there's like an upward trajectory, kind of like what you're saying. You're not flopping,
exactly.
Like, as long as there's an upward trajectory, could we bring these back? And it's like, I think I hear what he's saying. It's like kind of very similar to the point you're making, where like, but I think where that gets challenging is that it's judo already, and really all the grappling arts do. They already have a problem with like officiating is like so subjective, and it's so like everything's by a hair. And it's like, I don't know, did he get the tilt? Did he not get the tilt? Was it Wazari? Was he on his side? Was he kind of on his front? It's by a millimeter? You know what I mean? And we already had that problem when they initially got rid of Tachiwaza leg grabs, or they restricted them in 2010 when they said, okay, you can grab legs, but only if it comes off of the heels of another attack, or if it's a counter. So it has to be like a second attack in a string of attacks, or it has to be a counter to another attack. And honestly, it just got too confusing. It was too subjective. The referees couldn't get it right because one ref would say, well, that was a second attack, so it's okay. And then the other ref would go, well, there was too much time in between the attacks, so I don't consider it a second attack of a combo. And it was like, it was too much, and so they just got rid of it. They just said, look, no grabbing legs. All right. If you want to do it on the ground and flip them over and pin them. That's the best we're going to give you. And so would the same thing happen with kind of like what you and Neil Adams were talking about, is like, oh, there has to be this upward trajectory. I mean, could it work? I don't know. It's just, but I think I think it would be in the IJF's best interest, in my humble opinion, to get further away from like the sort of the subjective, sort of like, well, if it's at this angle or if it has this sort of trajectory, or maybe we just allow these types of leg grabs but not these other type of leg grabs. That's the other problem from a marketing standpoint, is like I said in our last podcast, if you want to grow the numbers of judo, you got to make it simple. You got to make it easy to understand. Because if I go into a class and I'm trying to teach all of these new students and I'm like, well, you can grab legs, but you kind of can't. You can do this type of leg grab, and on day one, I'm trying to tell them, well, you can do a teguruma and you can do a kataguruma, but nothing else. And it has to have an upward trajectory. Like if I'm trying to explain to people how that works on day one, or I'm trying to tell parents like how the sport is played, it's just going to be tough. I mean, that's just my opinion.
No, I agree with that too, but I think even sometimes the entry level to those sports, it almost does become confusing in general, because with a simplified way, because I feel like sometimes people just don't know. So I totally see your point on that, but I also think what they also need to do, and I look for this because I was curious in general, are there any statistics out there? Like, I know they use statistics for like shortening the matches, because they said the 5 minutes you were seeing just two gassed people knock it down the floor, you get most of your throws in the beginning. Are there any statistics on the number of throws that are successful like now as compared to back in the day? I would be really curious to see that.
I swear I've seen them. I know they keep track of like each individual like athlete. Like one of the things that you'll see if you watch IJF competition, the athlete will come out and they'll tell you how many ippons he's had, and like they'll even say what his most common throw is, like what his most common technique is, how many like osaikomis he's had. Like they'll have the statistics of each player. Now I don't know if they're necessarily like listed on the IJF site. Now you can go watch individual matches and see how they end, but I mean, there's like over 200 countries that participate in judo, so that's a lot of people that you'd have to go and look at the individual stats for. So I don't know who would have time to do that. But to answer your question, are there just like bulk stats of like for the year, how many like ippon throws did we have and how much golden score did we have? I know for a fact that the IJF does keep track of those. And I swear in my mind, I'm like picturing, like, I feel like I've seen a breakdown of that somewhere, whether it was on the IJF website or maybe they showed it during a tournament or something. But I know that they're out there, and I know they do keep track of those, because that's basically what they use, that plus the ratings. They look at their statistics and what type of techniques are being used. Mm-hmm. And then they look at where the ratings are going. And so because it's all a money thing. I mean, I'll be honest with that too. I'm sitting here talking about, exactly. I'm sitting here talking about, oh yeah, I don't like the leg grabs coming back because, it's about the purity of the sport and showing the sport and its specialty nature. But, that's probably only a little bit of the motivation behind that. Most of it is money and ratings. Let's be honest, and they want to keep it in the Olympics, and they want to keep all those sponsorships and all the money. So they want to keep it exciting and keep eyes on it. So yes, that's a long way of saying yes, those statistics are out there. Where you find them, I don't know exactly. But yeah, the IJF 100% keeps track of all that, because they juxtapose that with their ratings and then make a determination on which direction they want to take the rules, and just do everything they can to keep eyes on it.
Because you know what, Brian, honestly, like it could be a done deal. Like if they actually had those statistics and we were able to see as a general, like, because I'm actually curious now too, like back in the day when you were allowed leg grabs and when you weren't, knowing that there were other rule sets involved over time, how were accomplished through throws, specific throws. I would be really curious, because like it would be wild if like you were seeing a lot of the leg grab throws accounting for a lot of ippons.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Compared to them not being.
And and I don't know. I have no way. I have no way of really knowing. I could speculate, but that's all I'd be able to do. Like, would the leg grab throws result in more ippons? It's certainly possible. I think it could go either way. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said. I for the purity of the sport, to keep it upright and basically to just focus on, having it have its sort of speciality or specialty, I think is for me is important. But I will extend an olive branch. This is the one way I do think it might work, where you could bring back leg grabs, keep everything simple, and it could work. And you tell me what you think about this. This is, and people have brought this up. You may have even heard this already. I think it could possibly work if they just said, okay, leg grabs are on the table. All right. However, if you grab a leg and it doesn't result in a score, Shido. Considering that you only get 3 Shidos and you're out, leg grabs would be exceedingly rare. It'd be such a high risk. And you probably would only see them when a guy or girl is in the beginning of a match and they got no Shidos on the table, and they're going for it because they got room to spare, right? Or Shidos to spare. Or you might see it at the end when it's like nothing's working. I'm down to Wazari or I'm down on Shidos, whatever. I'm just gonna rip it and grab a leg and hope for the best. And so because it would make them so rare and so costly, that I think you might have a lot of guys who wouldn't change their position. I think a lot of guys still might stay upright. And try those more upright throws. So I don't know. Maybe that would work. I don't know.
Well, here's the here's the stats that I found. So there's a comparison between pre-2010 and post-2010. Pre is before leg grabs were banned, and post-2010 after leg grabs were banned. Leg grab throws pre 2010, before leg grabs were banned, was 10 to 20% of the attacks were leg grabs. Post, after they banned them, was less than 1%, which makes sense because you weren't allowed to do it. Tewaza, pre-2010, were 35%. Post was 40 to 50%. Koshiwaza, hip techniques, pre-2010, 20%. Post 2010 was 25%.
It didn't change much.
No, it's not Koshiwaza, not hip techniques.
The hip didn't.
Yeah, Ashiwaza, pre and post were both at 20%.
That surprises me. I would have thought Ashiwazas would have went through the roof. That's surprising.
Sutemiwaza is the, let's say, pre 2010 was 10 to 15%, and post 2010 was 5 to 10%. It actually dropped. Well,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
so it seems like the Tewaza went up, which makes sense because Seonage is considered Tewaza. So you probably had a lot more guys dropping for Seonages and stuff.
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of that now.
Yeah. So if you think about it, you have you take away the leg grabs, and then you have a major increase in Tewaza techniques. From 35% to 40 to 50%. And so everything pretty much went up except Ashiwaza, and then Sutemiwaza actually went down about 5%, which kind of makes sense too, because if you're using leg grabs as a Sutemiwaza, that would actually, you're looking at like a higher percentage.
That's true, I guess. Yeah, because if you're dropping back and you're grabbing a leg in the process, that's going to increase your chances. If you're scooping a leg like mid-throw when you're on your back, that's probably going to increase your chances of finishing that throw for ippon. So that's interesting.
Okay, so think of it this way: if you bring back the leg grabs, then Tewaza theoretically will go down at the attempts on trying to throw and scoring with a Tewaza hand technique. That would be the consequence.
It probably will. And when we say Tewaza, I mean, honestly, you could probably just, Tayatoshi and Seonage. That's really what that is. I mean, what other tewazas? I mean, I don't think you have a lot of guys doing ukiyotoshi. I mean, that's like,
Sumio Toshi.
yeah. What are they doing? Kata out there? They doing kata moves out there? I don't know, man. I think that's probably. I bet you of the tewaza, I bet you 90%, probably 90% account for Seonage and Tayatoshi. I bet those are probably like almost all of the tewaza that we're talking about. Maybe if you're talking about like Sukeshi, like Uchimata Sukeshi, that usually ends up being like a Sumiyotoshi kind of throw.
Yeah.
So maybe, but yeah, that's interesting. And I don't know. This could be like a whole other debate. But like the other issue is like, are they coming back? There's a lot of people that are just kind of like resigned to the idea that like this is happening, they're coming back, and I don't know that I'm fully sold on that. I mean, if they do whatever, I'm still going to do judo no matter what rules they change or whatever. I'm still doing judo, but I don't know that I'm like fully sold on the idea that just because the Kodokan said, okay, we're bringing these leg grabs back for our open weight division, I don't know that that really sells me on the idea that the IJF is going to be like, oh, well, then we have to bring them back. I don't know. If they were bringing it back for the whole tournament, for the whole All Japan tournament, I might be like, okay, maybe the IJF is doing something, because I don't think the Japanese, the most dominant country in judo, is going to have an entirely different rule set than the IJF. My thought would be, okay, they probably know something, or they're preparing for something, and that's why. But the fact that they're only doing it in the open weight division and not like the other 99% of the All Japan tournament,
Yeah.
makes me think that like, no, that's probably not happening. I mean, they might ease up on some things like they have in the last couple of years. They might, because if it was like a year or two ago, they said that if you drop for like a Seonage or a Kataguruma or whatever, and you're on the ground and you kind of scoop the leg just to help you finish the throw, they're not going to call that a penalty anymore. They're going to be lenient with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's something similar to that, where like maybe they're like, okay, if you hit a scoring throw, if you hit a big, ogoshi or something like that, and your hand happens to be just below the belt, but it's still around the waist, but just below the belt, they're not going to call you for that. As long as unless it's like an actual leg grab, they might ease up on things like that. But that would be if I was giving my opinion, that would be my opinion. I just think that they might ease up on it a little bit, but in my opinion, I don't think they're bringing them back.
Attention homeowners and business owners. Today's sponsor is Lucky's Pressure Washing. Are dirt, grime, and stains taking over your home and property? Let Lucky's Pressure Washing bring the shine back to your space. From sparkling driveways to spotless siding, Lucky's Pressure Washing delivers professional, high-quality service that leaves your property looking brand new. Affordable prices, fast, reliable service, satisfaction guaranteed. Call Lucky's Pressure Washing today and experience the difference. Your property deserves the best, and Lucky's got you covered. See the description down below to contact Lucky.
But again, maybe I'm the minority in that too.
Yeah, I think it's important too to explore, like, even we talked about last time, was like, why they want to do that. And my guess would be probably to like, maybe the traditional heritage of it. Maybe the diversity of styles, kind of cater to from other countries, has a strong wrestling background, strong sambo background, that type of thing. Who knows, right? And there has been arguments about cross discipline with competitors. So you're bringing that back because wrestling, judo, sambo, kind of opening the sport up again a little bit, and bringing leg grabs back because that's part of the other sports. And that was a big argument last time we talked. Well,
I don't like that.
You're especially you vehemently and adamantly said if let judo be judo, and if judo's everything, then it's nothing. So that's the argument with that, right? And then the other argument would be the over specialization, like the opposite of what you said, right? you were saying let's be specialized, and some people say, well, let's not be specialized. Yeah, so I'm guessing like there's arguments on both sides on like what are really trying to do with judo, and why are we changing it again? Who's thinking we should change this and why? You know.
Yeah, if they do, I think it's all going to be because of like marketing and money. I think that's the big thing here. It's like what Rick said earlier about like the stats and stuff that they're looking at. Um, I'm sure they're looking at numbers and things like that. And if they're thinking that, okay, if we open up the techniques a little more, and offer more techniques, then yeah, maybe we can get more people through the door and we can continue to grow the sport. I don't think they're looking at it because I don't think they're having trouble growing the sport of judo. They are in the United States, but that's it. Like I said before, if you look at the rest of the world, it's not even close. Judo, when it comes to the world, it dwarfs wrestling, it dwarfs Greco, it dwarfs BJJ. I mean, it really does. But in the United States, we have problems with it. So, I don't know. It's because we have a lot to compete with here in the United States. Wrestling and BJJ and stuff like that. Usually they win when it comes to popularity and stuff like that among the grappling arts. So, in my opinion, I think if the IJF does bring them back, it's going to be a money thing. I think it's going to be them looking at the ratings and looking at the techniques and probably pulling up the statistics you just pulled up, Dave, about the numbers on like how many more ippons we're going to see from certain techniques and things like that. I think it'll be based on that if they do bring it back. But I don't know. Like I said, I see them maybe just loosening up on some of the penalties and stuff with grabbing legs. But I don't know if I see them coming all the way back. I don't know. What do you think? What does Rick think?
I mean, like, I don't know, like, I'm with you guys. Like the prospect of it, I'll admit, is exciting. I'm returning to judo. I've been dabbling with it. Dave was my first instructor back in the day. I just got some privates in with Dave before I went for the IBJJF World, so going back into it, so it'd be nice to have a little bit of another element to it, but it's not a make or break for me from a personal standpoint. But the fact is, like you said, they're going to look at everything and figure out what's the best decision to make from a marketing perspective, from an optics perspective, to get more people to watch judo. And like you said, the recruitment of it for it, I mean, it's the biggest sport in France. I think one of the biggest. It's big in Brazil. Judo is bigger than Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Go figure. It is, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so like it's already huge. It's just here in the U.S. Like I was telling this to Dave too, Brian. When the IBJJF World Masters Worlds is in Vegas every year. Mm-hmm. And this year, they also do with this thing called the Jiu-Jitsu Con. So the total number of competitors, because the Jiu-Jitsu Con is like all ages, there was 10,000 people competing that over the 4 or 5 days for Jiu-Jitsu. That's how huge it is in the U.S.
Jeez.
And it's like, and it's a shame that we don't have that for judo, because like I said this to Dave, like Kayla Harrison getting those gold medals, that's like the equivalent of the U.S. getting, a World Cup in soccer. Like it's so rare for us to really.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
And I would love to see us be able to be competitive and get more. But I do think this is a very selfish U.S. perspective. If they're looking at, hey, let's tap the U.S. market because we have showing up for Masters Worlds, maybe we throw in this little nugget here, this little gift here, this little extra leg thing. You can get a couple people in that might be more inclined to cross train and compete. But at the same time, I have no clue. I think when I started judo, it was legal. Then I competed again when it was you can only grab the legs.
Hey guys, I got a new coaching system that I developed. It's called the MindCoach system. It's a 7-step process to help you reach your peak potential. We talk about dreams, we talk about goals, we talk about strategy, we talk about execution, mindset, and then reaching your peak potential. By using all of those, we can get you there, and we can develop a plan for you to be able to find your goals and to reach those and reach your peak potential. So click the link below, check it out, contact me, and then we can go from there.
To Rick's point about maybe the IJF is maybe looking at the numbers, looking around the world, they're seeing, hey, there's a market in the United States that we probably need to tap into. And I could see that happening. I could see the IJF looking at the United States and being like, hey, there's a lot of money over there. There's a lot of eyes. There's a lot of, they got a lot over there, right? So, the idea of saying, well, let's maybe, bring in some new techniques and allow some new techniques that might be more appealing, or might be more similar to one of their biggest sports, which is wrestling. The only reason I think that might not work is because I don't know that it's that great of a marketing strategy to say, hey, wrestlers, come check out our sport. We do something that you do, but like not very well. We do very little of it, and you're very limited into what you're allowed to do, meaning the leg grabs. I think it'd be a better marketing strategy to say, hey guys, guess what? There's this aspect of wrestling and grappling that you guys may not be that familiar with, the big throws, and these turning hip throws and shoulder throws and stuff. We do that a lot. Oh, and by the way, we also do this little cool thing called submissions. That's a whole nother thing too. So I think that might be a better marketing strategy than just saying like, hey, we're going to try to do things that you guys do, but not as good and not as vast. It's better, I think, to say, hey, check out judo, because we do something similar to you guys, but we do something that's like a completely different category of grappling. I don't know. Like I said, I think that's probably a better marketing strategy than to just say, hey, come do leg grabs, but we're not going to do them nearly as frequently and with the same level of effectiveness, and broader array of techniques as you guys do it. So come join. I don't know. It just doesn't seem, it seems counterintuitive.
Um, yeah.
Keep talking. Hold on.
Can't tell what Dave's got going on there.
I don't know. Something, he's got a party going on there.
My kid just came in. Hold on a second.
Okay. Well, I'll add in something, Brian. You'll probably appreciate this too, just from a perspective of it's very pro current judo. I was telling David's story last night. So when I fought the IBJJF, the Masters Worlds this past summer, and it was so wild because I only had two matches. There's not a lot of guys. Just I'm in like the stock, so to speak, in the plus 100 category. So I did anyone from 220 pounds up, in size, and but everyone kind of has a similar. Nobody wants to do like a single leg takedown, for example, because as soon as the other guy sprawls, you're done, But it was weird because everyone wants the big takedown, and one takedown you win. Kind of the first match after, and I had some privates from Dave. I ended up getting the guy with the Sumi Gaeshi because I wore him down a little bit. I got the grip, the sleeve grip, and took him. I took him down. He got back up, and then the next thing I got was an Ogoshi. So it was all like just typical judo-based stuff, and this is in the gi, So I was like, okay, cool, I won one. Then I fought the next guy. The next guarantee was a pure judo guy, and I'm a lefty, so I always go kinki otsu when I get it right. I always feel good about myself.
I'm a lefty bit. Too. Yeah,
this guy was a lefty, and he had okay. And so you fight when you fight one of us, it's weird. And this guy got his grip in. He was also very strong. He got a grip with his left hand, and he pat on me. Now, mind you, leg grabs, I can grab anything I want.
Yeah.
I could not move this guy. And I'll be honest, he did one attempt like a hip toss, and I tried to get his leg, and I'm thinking this isn't going to work. But he ended up using traditional judo. He eventually he was working Ashley was with a foot sweep. He eventually caught me with a foot sweep. Boom, knee on belly to arm bar. I was done. That was like near the end of the match. I was like, but it was all like judo, even though the leg grabs were full on range. So there's a pro judo aspect to it, to where if you like at your level or in Dave's level, you guys can handle people like me that maybe aren't skilled in that and still want to shoot. If you get your grips, you're going to launch people, And so there's that other part of it too, where if you get really proficient at it, it almost the leg grabs don't even become a thing. If you got your grips and you got your position, you're winning, So there's that's sort of just a general pro judo piece,
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, and that kind of gets back to like the sort of the speciality thing that I was talking about. Like when you're like a real specialist in that area, like I've gone with lots of wrestlers, And I'm not going to sit here and say that I've mopped the floor with every wrestler I've gone with. No, I haven't. There's been plenty of times where they've gotten the better of me, but there's also been a lot of times where my very pure judo has really caught a lot of these wrestlers off guard. One of the things that happens a lot with wrestlers is they'll do like they'll do a lot of times they'll do like a duck under, right? And they get almost kind of this almost arm triangle type position from standing. And I can't tell you how many times I've just ripped a makikomi. Their arm is right here. I wrap that arm and then boom, and then I can bury them with it. Because really I don't think they're that used to it, because again, it's even though it's on the table for them, they're allowed to do that technique in freestyle wrestling, because I think the just the idea, the overall like culture of wrestling doesn't always revolve around those kind of like those big throws in that more upright type of stance. It just doesn't, like they fall like victim to it. Now, the one thing that I will say as a judoka I fall victim to is I fall victim to like a single leg where they kind of like shelf it up on their shoulder. I get caught with that a lot too. If a wrestler snatches up my ankle, I know I'm in trouble, because I just don't really know what to do there. Like I'm just like, So I've been dumped on my backside plenty of times by wrestlers who get that low single. So it's back and forth, and I guess that's what I like, though. I guess that's why I'm like so resistant to the idea of like leg grabs kind of becoming a thing in judo, because I like that idea, and I said this in the last podcast, of like we all have our specialty, and we can all see kind of like what works when we have these cool, like kind of like I call them like cultural exchanges. You know what I mean? Where it's like if I'm the judo guy and I'm going with the wrestler, that wrestler could be like, "Whoa, dude, what was that cool little arm wrap thing you did when I like did the duck under?" Like, "Oh, that's called a makikomi, blah blah blah." And then I can be like, "Hey, wrestler, well, that crazy little ankle pick thing where you shoved my ankle up on your shoulder and then flung me down, like that's pretty cool." Like, and we can have these exchanges where it's like, I don't know. I feel like if the grappling arts all just get kind of diluted and we all do like a little bit of everything and we're all just like jacks of all trades, masters of none, that to me is no fun. I don't know that, but again, that's just my opinion. I don't know.
No, Brian, what do you think about, and Dave as well, but this would be an interesting concept. Can you imagine if they operated with two styles of judo in a competitive sense? You have the traditional judo that we're talking about now. And then, like, because I was just at that Kosen Judo tournament, if they would do a separate one, it's a Kosen Judo. So now you have, just like you have wrestling, you have freestyle and Greco-Roman. Wouldn't that be kind of a neat way to go? Because even with that Kosen Judo, you still have, it's kind of, I think it's the perfect marriage of the two, given the situation, that would be really neat too if they were doing both of those.
That's where I'd like to see it go. Yeah, that's where I'd like to see it go. I think if they really want to, sort of expand judo and make judo into like a or the IJF specifically. The IJF really wants to market itself, and they want to say, hey, we want wrestlers to get involved, or we want BJJ guys to get more involved, and we want to pick up some of those guys. Then I think they should continue to push this Kosen Judo thing, because I think that's probably the best way to do it. Keep judo in the state that it's in now for the most part. I think the biggest thing that the IJF needs to work on is not bringing back leg grabs and trying to get, American wrestlers to show up to judo clubs when that's not going to happen. Instead of focusing on that, I think they should be focusing on like some other like rule changes, to make the rules a little more simplistic, get rid of all the different ways to score wazari, get rid of all the different, hansaku makes that they're calling ippons now. You know what I mean? Just look, a throw to the back, a throw to the side. That's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just if your back hits, ippon. If your side hits, wazari. Like, that's it.
You know what? In that tournament, though, you needed everything was wazari, right?
Yeah.
That's
So so like actually my coach, my buddy in that tournament, he actually won. Even though he was purely a jiu-jitsu guy, he won with throws. Oddly enough, he did. I think he did an Uchimata and an Uchigari, but he got two solid throws, but you got a Wazari each, no matter if it was on the side or back, you get a Wazari. So two solid throws get you the Ippon. And that's how he won. But then people were also doing pinning. So Osai Komi was in there for 20 seconds. And then all the typical, the Jujikatamis, all that kind of stuff was in there as well.
I think the mixing them up, I'm cool with that. But the only issue I have with that is the higher level of injury that can happen. Because if you don't train judo correctly and long enough, and you don't know it, and you're kind of like somewhat of a novice, you're really good at jujitsu, but you're a novice at judo, and you're forcing techniques that you don't know, that you're in a bad position, you can really hurt.
Yeah.
And
That's a
I
good point.
know at that tournament, now every tournament has danger and I get it, but I know there was some injuries at that tournament that I think were a little bit different than a regular judo tournament, frankly.
That's what I heard. Yeah, I wasn't there, but yeah, I mean, Rick can might maybe attest to that. But I know one of our guys, broke his arm. Now that I don't know if that was necessarily due to the rules. That may have been, he may not have fallen the right way. And I know that, um, I know that not to call him out here, but Big Mike, he's a great guy. But we always joke with him about his falling, and sometimes we don't joke. Sometimes we tell him like, Mike, you gotta get your falling a little right. We like to tell him he falls like Peter Griffin, like in Family Guy with his arm back, So he falls a little funny, but I digress. No, yeah, I did hear that too. I did hear that there were some pretty bad injuries.
Well, you know what? I mean, to your point, Brian, the one of the major things that we do practice in judo is the actual art of falling. It is
Hmm.
art of falling. Like you have to get good at falling and relaxing, and even in a tournament, even in randori, like you got to be able to give up a fall and be able to do
Yeah,
it. That's the beauty of the sport. That's why people don't get hurt because they really learn. Now, do they fight like crazy and fight out of the throws? And of course, that's all part of the fighting. But the fact of the matter is, there is a safety factor there that if you don't practice the falling and you just do throws and you're just novice and you don't immerse yourself into it, I I'm just seeing more and more injuries because of that. At least one of the reasons why is because the the purity of like learning the actual art of falling and throwing and relaxing, being able to the timing's important. If your timing's off or in a bad position and you don't know it and you force it, then it's a problem. It increases the level of injury. And I think as soon as and I'm not saying not do it, I'm saying like do it right, because you want to make sure that like if you're going to blend both of them, it better have have emphasis on safety on both sides. However that would be. And I think that I'm pretty adamant about that because I've seen, too many injuries by blending things together and people don't know certain basics.
that's a really, really good point. And I wonder, I mean, I wasn't really even thinking it necessarily when I'm kind of talking about, oh yeah, Duke goes in judo, so wrestlers will show up and, BJJ guys will show up. And it's like, when you're doing these throws in a gi, it's different than wrestling when, you're not wearing a gi, and you're kind of in a bad spot. You can kind of slip out. You're not, but with judo, and obviously with BJJ, you're not really doing throws typically. I mean, I know it does happen, but the art of BJJ is not focused around throws. There's one or two maybe in a match, and then most of the match takes place on the ground. But with judo, the way that, you get tied up, the way you get tangled up with your opponent, and the way that the legs interlock and things like that, um, that requires a lot of experience to understand how to work safely in those positions. And that brings me actually to another point that I never actually thought about. I wonder if do you think bringing back leg grabs, let's suppose hypothetically leg grabs were completely put back on the table, would that make judo a little safer? Because you figure without leg grabs, you're dealing with you're more upright and you're dealing with what I would assume would be a lot more leg entanglements. I know when I fought without leg grabs, there was a lot more there was less leg entanglements. But then when you're upright and you're closer together, yeah, there's a lot more leg entanglements, and you're seeing a lot more, different throws, where you're closer to your opponent and your legs are intertwined.
Yeah, I don't know if the data would even show that. I mean, I would be really curious to take a look at that in terms of, I mean, that would be another thing, right? You look at different injuries, with, you play the sport differently, and you have maybe different injuries. It could be just like, it could be several different things, right? It could be like, well, there's always going to be injuries in sports, especially combat sports like
Yeah,
judo and sambo and you name it, right? It's just going to happen. But what kind of injuries? And
yeah,
what and how often? So if you play it differently, or there different injuries, or the increase, decrease, all that stuff has to be kind of weighed out. But in fact, judo in itself is a pretty safe sport, regardless of, especially considering the high impact and high velocity and power and technique that goes into it. And I think that,
yeah,
like, the cool thing about judo is, like, the more technique you have, the safer it is.
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, I would, when I was, if I'm in Randori, I'm going with every black belt I can find. I would rather do that than somebody else that's like bigger and stronger and less experienced, because it's a higher injury. So
yeah,
the better you get at, the safer it is. And in theory, that's probably true. And from my experience, it's certainly true. And I think, like, looking at that, you wonder how it all works out. But you level the playing field no matter what. If you're doing judo right, and you're practicing it safely, and you're doing good technique, and you're executing technique, and your opponent can fall, and he or she knows how to ukemi, how to safely fall, and you can control it, they can control their body, you get a pretty safe sport, no matter what
yeah, yeah.
you know
You do. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, judo is surprisingly safe. I mean, we talked about this, I think, on the a couple podcasts ago about how often do you see like someone like get thrown on their head and get like concussed? I don't know that I've ever seen it in an IJF tournament. I don't think I've ever seen it in a tournament that I competed at. I've never seen anyone get concussed. And again, I'm sure that it happens. I have no doubt. But in all my years in judo, I've never seen it. So
it
yeah,
is
it
it
is
is
safe.
amazing
Yeah,
when you're slamming somebody to their back and they just get up.
yeah,
I mean, it's remarkable, you know, how that happens. Of course, I've seen that happen. I've seen people get knocked out and things like that, but it's so rare to see,
yeah.
considering the way people get slammed, which is till this day surprises me. It's really amazing.
It really is, and that's why, like, and again, that just going back, kind of going full circle to what this whole podcast debate, whatever, is about. With the leg grab thing, it's like even with like that's one of the things that I think makes judo so clean. Now, I know, granted, the limiting of leg grabs is only relatively recent in the history of judo, where we're going on what 10 years, actually, well, more than 10 years. It was what 2010, so we're going on like a decade and a half now. But and I realized that they were in we had leg grabs before, but even then, I mean, I've talked to old school guys, and they would say that they were kind of rare, and just to shoot in like on some legs was kind of frowned upon. I don't know. I never competed back in the 70s or 80s, but I've talked to guys who have. They said it was rare. They said when guys did it, it was still kind of frowned upon. You could probably speak to that better than I could, Dave. But the point I'm getting at is that because judo is so much of an upright grappling style of art, it everything's so clean, because it's so predicated on like tying up the upper body. There's no flailing limbs like you see in like freestyle wrestling. Like in the rare situations where you do see a big throw in freestyle or folk style, everything's flailing, right? You got arms flailing, the guy's legs are flailing and everything, and then they usually fall in some weird way. You rarely see like a very clean, throw to the back, ippon style throw in like freestyle or folk style wrestling. But and I think again a lot of that is because you have leg grabs in play. You don't have a gi, but I think that's one of the beautiful things about not having the leg grabs is that it forces the judo athletes to focus on tying up that upper body and really getting your grips right. You can't just, there's no bailout. There's no get out of jail free where you just go, oh crap, I'm not getting the grips. Okay, I'm just diving into the leg. It forces you to have to really grip fight, and it makes the throws cleaner when you're forced to have to tie up the upper body properly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the beauty of it is, it is a beautiful sport. There's no doubt about it. I mean, no matter how you look at it, and either way, I think the leg grabs, it's just a different game. I mean, it adds to the technique that you can employ. Does it change it? I think the statistics show from what I read earlier, yeah, it does. Something's going to shift, and apparently the Tewas has shifted. You take it
Yeah.
out, and you like you said, you're more Tayatoshis, more Ichimadas, more Cianagis. Um, that just there's going to be a different game, and it's good, and that's going to be, those throws are bigger, they're more dynamic, they're more visual, and you get a sport that, when you take away the kokas and yukos and throw in wazaris and ippons, and you put in big hand techniques and hip techniques, well, there you go. You have a sport that shows dynamic throws, and it's a big knockout boom, and it's impressive as hell.
And I love that, and I just hope that it keeps that identity. I just don't want to see it get watered down. And for the people that love the leg grabs, and people that want to see judo be this more complete, like, I think people get bummed out because they're like, if judo is the martial art of throws, I want it to do all the throws, right? And I kind of get that, but it's hard to do. And like I said, I look, we've taught, I don't know if you've been at the club where I've taught Morote Gari off the Newaza position. I've taught a Teguruma from the turtle position. I think if people really want these techniques sort of to live on in the modern day rule set, I think they can, and I think they do. It's just a matter of, like, do you want to teach these, from the ground, and utilize them as, more turnover techniques so you can get the Osai Komi? Yeah, I think that they do live on to some degree in that realm. But I think in order to keep judo as the martial art of the throw, like, there's a reason why freestyle wrestling is not known for big throws and Greco-Roman is, and that's because of the mitigation of leg grabbing. There's just no two ways about it. There's no magic mathematical equation you can come up with where you can go, well, if leg grabs are on the table, then, it's not going to sacrifice any of the big throws. It always will. Freestyle wrestling understands that, or the wrestling community as a whole understands that. That's why there's freestyle and Greco. And I'm hoping that the judo community understands that too. And maybe they'll make their own version of Greco, or the inverse, where they do add leg grabs, and maybe that can be Kosen judo. But however they do it, I just really hope judo keeps its identity as, like, the big throw martial art, because I love that. I love throwing.
Well, let's leave it at that, guys. It was a battle of leg grabs between Brian and Rick. I think my 2 cents in there. Thanks, everybody. I want to let everybody know also that I have a new book out. It's called Unstoppable. It's on Amazon. I'll put the link down in the description section of this video. And thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming on. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, click the notification bell, comment below, and we'll come back and we will continue this fight. Fight this out until leg grabs are either in or they're out. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.